The real ancient Egypt is far more exotic than it's ever portrayed or anyone ever describes it. So when I show it to you, you're not going to believe it. That's why I have to make this video. This will have to be watched. Earphones alone will not do. You will have to see what I'm showing you. I wrote a pen and paper game, 2007 Shackled Prophecy. Shackled Prophecy was too much of a video game, so I moved on to the sequel, Demonic Diary, and that was going okay. And then there were problems in my life. So once I was able to write again, and actually I turned to writing as a solace. Once I was able to do it again, I was okay with it. There was no more Mickey Mouse. It was just blood, and it was just misery. I was creating a game where you can be a good guy, but you're not going to win. That's already known. So you're just under an oppression that you can't defeat. And it's coming from really odd sources. You know, it's nothing really that you've seen. And it was original, and it had multi-dimensional Asian themes, but it was all over the world. It was just global catastrophe amongst many cultures, and that was going okay. And also during this time, I'm looking at Spears of Dawn do so well on Kickstarter, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna bring this is popping, I'm going with this. Then I'm looking at, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is coming out, maybe I should create it for these rules. More motivation, kind of got a sense of purpose. I'm on my way. I start playing 5th edition, and I'm not liking the rules, so I have to backtrack. Now I need new rules. I'm creating new rules. I'm enjoying it. It's a task, but it must be done for me to reach perfection, for me to really abide by my true spirit, for me to be creativity. I gotta create new rules. The rules they're not. I've played too much and they're not good enough. So I'm creating new rules. And now it's like, hey, I can't use my old world. I've evolved as a person. Everything's newer. I can't use my old world. And I'm looking at the Spirit of Dawn source material, and I'm saying, you know what? I need to study history. And if you study history, it will eventually take you to Egypt. Genesis 42, 42 laws, Asar's 42 judges, the priests mastering 42 books, 42 settlements, 42 forces, Yeshaya hiding for 42 months. Oral traditions speak of 42 tribes that were amongst the first settlers or citizens. You can sort of see an example of that in this picture from Science magazine, where it's a radiocarbon dating map based on pottery and other organic fragments to trace settlements and how they moved as the desert expanded and receded. Yeah, I've really studied intensely. I've used every avenue in this age of information: videos, books, ebooks. The more I've studied, the more I've come to realize that this is not what I expected. It's far more alien, in a sense. But once you realize that it only seems alien because you haven't been seeing the actual image, it becomes more interesting. Now I can take this, show people reality, and it'll come across as some bizarre fantasy world, but it beats my earlier impression of what ancient Egypt was. I pictured it like the movies, and some movies are decent action flicks, but they're just soulless, just a bunch of sandy people, a really boring narrative compared to what it really is. I took what I could. I I just look at things scientifically. Even the Bible. You hand me a Bible and I'm like, oh, an ancient spiritual book. Cool. And it's written by the Hebrew people, and they kind of have a writing style that's similar to ancient Egyptian texts. And I'm seeing some of the same stories. And and oh, this person really seems like they're connecting and they're prophetizing, and look at everything scientifically. Like I use collaborative evidence. Two people in different locations are saying the same thing. I build from that. So I build theories and I sort of rank them, and I grade these principles into a collaborative picture. And that's how I fill in the blank when it's something that I don't know or something that I can't research. Or when I do research, I find conflicting evidence. All of this went into creating 42 tribes, which is just a setting based on pre-dynastic Egypt, right before the time it forms. And I'll probably have source material for different settings and all that. Primary source material. And I'm talking like I'm basing everything on what it was before it was changed by the Greeks and then English, and removing all of these filters to get to a walking with dinosaurs type of image. And that's it, with maybe a little smattering of Games of Thrones / 300 fantasy. That's it. I should also add that another way that I study and that works really well is I eavesdrop on arguments. Find out people's agendas, point of view, bias, whatever, what they believe in, and eavesdrop on their debates. People debate on message boards all the time. And a lot of times they're smarter than I am on the subject. I want to see, especially when they're debating or they're arguing or just discussing things, eavesdrop, know how to eavesdrop, know what you're dealing with, know what you're looking at, and check their sources. This is a quick example of what I'm working with and how exotic this setting really is, unbeknownst to me. And as you can see, this map, and I'll explain why I'm showing all these upside down maps real quick. That was their point of view. There's no up or down in space, blah, blah, blah. And then the Nile runs towards the Mediterranean. So from their point of view, everything's going down, and that's their up and down. These represent not really so much nations, but well, actually I'd say they do represent nations, but don't look at them as big cities. Most of the people during these period where agriculture is still burgeoning and you don't have major food industries, the bulk of the population, 90% of the population, did not live in cities. So when I mark the map like this, understand that basically is sort of a range of a nation, maybe a little larger. And their neighbors would have something to say about it. All of these are based on real places, and I'll explain them. Ptah is the best I could probably discern. That's probably closer to what Punt was, a nation in Ethiopia, modern Ethiopia. Kerma, which may be the oldest of them all. Taseti, which became one of the first locales in ancient Egypt. Teshemu, which also became one of the first locales. One of the things that you'll hear if you see a movie in ancient Egypt, the first myth that it carries is calling it Egypt. The name is it's not really definitely Kemet. Kemet I don't even have on here. Although I would probably, and this is kind of guesswork, I'm thinking Kemet existed as a concept of anything that lived near the Nile. It was basically the word for the Nile Valley, and that's why the word Kemetau, it wasn't just Egyptian citizens or people of Teshemo, Taseti. It was the people that lived near the fertile land. If you look at how their writing, and I'm not even really sure, there's different ways to pronounce it. Metanetters is not right, I know that, but that's the common way to pronounce it, and it's indigenous, I guess. So if you look at that, it almost translates Black Nation perfectly. I don't believe that's what it was, and the reason being is the most cutting edge individual I know when it comes to understanding the language, and I've gotten to the point where I can study, I can go to a library, flip through a book, and like, I know this stuff, I know that, come on. you know, and not by the book, because I've studied so much. So when I do study people, I have to study people that are really cutting edge. So I'm studying this guy, Asar Imhotep. I call him the Whisperer. And according to him, even though it looks specifically like Black Nation, what he does is he goes back and he looks at languages. And let me tell you, the ancient Egyptian language is like the Latin of Africa. It's related to so many different languages. So he'll look at languages that it was related to, languages that borrowed from it, and he'll connect the two to find out what these words meant in languages that are very similar to it, which is the family branch that it's in, which I think is a little suspect, the Afro-Asiatic, but it's also related to Niger, Congo, and strongly. That's what I mean. It's like the Latin of Africa. So according to him, Asar Imhotep, and he shows it, you know, like other words that are similar to Kemet, or actually mean Kemet. That was their word for it that just was passed down. Those words, most of them are relating to land that you can use because it's fertile, like fertile land. Probably was in use in pre-dynastic times because everybody wanted a piece of that fertile land. Looking at the map, you also have Takadia, which is based on Yam, Deshemu, well, Kanana, which is based on Canaan. That's probably a closer way to how it was spoken. Sagiga is Samaria. That's what Samaria was called before the Akkadians changed the name. And also, like, just like Egypt, the name was changed. As far as like just how stuff is written, like Kemet was more of, even later on in later periods, it appears like it's more of a general term for the Nile Valley and not really the name of the state. Jagaba is the one area that is not based on any real nation or civilization of people. It's based more on a structure or rumors, and it sort of blends into the whole fantasy. Like, I had a lot of reservations when it came to studying ancient Egypt. It comes off as being so dusty, sandy, and fake. But when you really break it down, you see some things like a metaphysical religion, the belief in magic as a principle. You know, it's round. It's really out there. It's like a matrilineal progressions, the first people, you know, and then you look at the societies that existed before ancient Egypt, the seeds that were planted. In a sense, it's probably a lot older than it's portrayed, because these societies had dynastic rulers. They were just located further in their north or south. Then you look at like the pyramids, and I'll explain some of that stuff. I'm gonna cut, and I just want to make one point before I really get to what this is about. And this is about understanding that if I show you what ancient Egypt was really like, and you have these pyramids that aren't tombs, you have the lay of the land, the people, and what they look like, people are going to say, well, how come this and how come that? And so I'm going to explain. This is Ptah. Ptah, through English, through our culture, is known as a god. I will refer to him as a force. And it sort of highlights the difference between our understanding of things, our approach to science, which when you really break it down is the same approach, and the approach by the people in the Nile Valley and that culture. From their cultural perspective, it's pretty similar. The big difference is we, at least leading culture, popular culture, you ask, how did we come into existence? What is our purpose? And the answer is God created us. The Nile Valley, the next question is, who created God? Ptah is not the God that created the universe. Ptah is creativity itself, a principle of creativity embodied in different forms. A lot of times he's a dwarf, or he's like Twa, the people we call pygmies, but he has many different forms. And he's a patron for the arts of their society. And I mean arts as in like craft, like a spoke in a wheel, you know, space stuff like pottery, temples for Ptah, because it's a concept. But that concept also goes into their explanation for how matter came about, how everything came about. This is just an example of how their approach to science was different, but they use the same methodology. They have this principle of creativity. It had to exist for there to be creation, and they look to find this principle in nature, and they work their way back to the beginning. That's their approach. The way they work their way back is pretty much universal language of science, observation, theories, trial and error. On a tangent, but I had to lay that groundwork. Now I'm into my motivations for creating this video. One thing 42 tribes will not have is
the Nubians.
No Nubians.
Fearsome warriors constantly raided Egypt from the south.
No Nubians. It's 42 tribes is based on primary sources, and the name Nubia or Nubian does not ever appear in Egyptian text. Those archers were found in the tomb of Nefertiti. I'm probably getting it wrong. They were moved. It was in the middle of Egypt. They weren't labeled with anything. They were found with the spearmen, and so you have Egyptian archers, Egyptian spearmen, but they're just labeled as Nubian. The term, we don't really even know where the term started. It's credited as originating in a medieval period as an English word, which meant it probably evolved from some Latinish dialect that the Romans were speaking in the Greco-Roman era. So it's thought to be maybe derived from the word Nub, which is a prefix for gold, and there was even a city of Nub. And like, remember what I said earlier, if there was a city of Nub, 80,000 people lived in that city, then you know all around that city there were 800,000 people. Imagine that. You know they were living foul. They probably had gold makeup powder, gold flakes in their porridge, with the cities of gold. That's who the Nubians are. They was the ones with the money. It just doesn't back translate well. And really there's no sense in back translating the word. Just use the word. So I'll be damned. And people, it's a mistake to even, like, why are you looking for the word Nubian when it doesn't exist until after Egypt is gone? And it's placed on so many people. It's placed on Esau, which is a loaded word, thought mainly, possibly to mean people in their north, what we might call Southerners with our maps, to Kent, who are like just people who were known as the founders. They were probably of a Kerma stock, maybe of a ancient Saharan group of people. It was a tribe. The Measure, who might be those archers you're looking at, since they were a police force, who were kind of in the southeast, east of the Red Sea, sometimes in Asia. They moved around. Then you have, like, it's applied to so many people. The Remu and people that you rarely even hear about are just kind of lazily referred to as Nubians, and it robs the culture and the land, the understanding of history. And especially for me, if I'm using this as a game setting, it's almost like if you take Game of Thrones and you just say, okay, we're gonna call everybody that isn't a ginger a black. I don't care what clan they're from, what nation they're in. We're just gonna have the blacks and the gingers. So it's just crazy to me. And a lot of times the word Nubian is used for people that are just plainly Egyptian, like those archers, or the Nehesu, which you can see in the tomb of Ramesus III. They're under the symbol of the pharaoh, or Taseti, which was the first township. It was a nation, really, and then it became a nation amongst the two nations. It became like the first settlement. And then sometimes it's used for other nations like Kerma and Kush. There's this 2009 cranial skeletal analysis that compared ancient Egyptians to other groups of people, and you can see it, and like they're right next to the people called Nubians, and part of that is because they're one and the same people in a lot of cases. It's basically Kemetau. It's the people of the Nile Valley overlapping because they're all the people of the Nile Valley. Then you have, and it all sort of blends together. It reminds me of that John Sally commercial where he says that high fructose corn syrup is just sugar flavored sugar. Bad translations, words that don't mean what they're translated into just so you can lazily throw everything as Nubian, and it doesn't fit. This ambiguity allows people to sort of lazily segregate the narrative of history. Then, beyond that, there's another word, the Nehesi, that's often translated into Nubian. It's a word that Egyptologists still don't understand. That doesn't stop them from speculating and guesstimating. Here's an example.
Egypt basically and historically looks south. Not only for its conquest, but also for where it got its products. And one of those products that we tend to forget today was manpower. They would send caravans down that we would perhaps today call slave raiding caravans. And they would come back with thousands of Nubians.
Thutmose's southern campaign is successful. He returns from Nubia with large numbers of slaves. His officers turn them into paid, privileged soldiers because Nubian warriors are considered superb archers.
That's a perfect example, perfect, because that's how Egyptologists, in this case Donald Redford, and I'm thinking that's a History Channel, paired the same unwholesome information. In this case, they're using dark-skinned Egyptian archer models, like real art, in some good old boy fairy tale that transforms the Nile into the Mississippi. And I used to think this stuff, like before I really paid attention, was just a way to make it more palpable for the insecure people who are running stuff. But now I realize this is just game. They're smarter than that. Check out their Egyptians.
They can inflict terrible injuries even from a great distance. Quietly, Thutmose builds a powerful army. The pharaoh is convinced.
That's Jehudamus, and that's the closer pronunciation to Thutmose. And that's him getting completely whitewashed, ethnicized, an African nation that if you were to see these people moving into your neighborhood, you're like, it would be kind of a how you feel about black people check. These people, based on their own artwork that they created, it's getting turned into some Dixieland fairy tale by Redford, who's a Canadian. I mean, come on, Redford, you're Canadian. Then they have pasty African-American looking people. One looks like Anthony Anderson. And they're playing like some fictional segregated. Yeah, I'm serious. Like, go back. One of them looks like Anthony Anderson. And they're playing like some fictional segregated class. Like they were free 1 minute. Now they're just lining up. Yes, boss. What you want? And I mean, it just hit me. They're using Egyptian soldiers, the Kemetau, the people of the Nile, the people under the Pharaoh symbol, as some foreign made-up class of actual Egyptians in the same tomb that you had the archers. So you know what the Egyptians look like. They're darker than these fake people that they made up, and complete different race than the whoever they have playing Jehudamus. And wait a second though. Look at these spearmen. They kind of look like those Zulus in this war reenactment. I mean, how about the British? They can travel around the world reenacting wars with people. That's funny when you think about it. When you look though, it's the same shield design. You know, I've read some of Redford's work. He thinks Nehesi means black, like as in 2014 black people. There are too many Egyptians that have the same complexion as them. Some is dark, some, you know, they're both brown in some cases. Okay. I'll get back to Nehesi. I will get back to Nehesi because I know these fools don't know what it means, so I'll say what I think it means. But one thing I want to jump on though is there really isn't a whole lot of evidence for slavery in the ancient times in the Nile Valley. That's sort of a myth that people have just ran with. If you compare the entry, just like Wikipedia, like some mainstream stuff, like Wikipedia entry for slavery in ancient Egypt is about 2 paragraphs. And you compare that to pre-Columbus exploration of America, and it's like 8 pages. Everybody from all over the place has been to America. I followed Wikipedia's references, and it takes you to these 2 sites, Tour Egypt and Egypt King, that are both using photoshopped images to make some people look Sambo-ish and some other people look white. Look at both. Look at all the faces. So, and I don't know what snarky son of a bitch did that. And I didn't just look at Wikipedia. There's just, it's hard to really find any type of culture for slavery. And like I could find something about Amenhotep. He wanted 40 slave girls. Or something crazy like that. Nefertiti talked about going to war because he wanted some servants. You know, in 3,000 years, some people are going to get served. They're human. But they didn't have a slave culture like you see in other societies. This is nothing at all like Rome or something like that. You know, and you got to remember, these folks, as you can see, they valued labor, creativity, working for your stuff, working for the government. Because I mean, this is more. I don't know if I call it a monarchy. It's more like a spiritual monarchy. But they're working, and you need that type of stuff. You need expertise. The priest would study to teach people how to build it, like a tire on a chariot or something. It's ingrained in their culture. I mean, when creativity is a divine force, you're not really getting down with slavery. So, and then the evidence that's on the other side of slavery is beyond any, we're talking 10,000 workers eating 105 cows, 368 sheep. How will that be? 21,000 cows, and goat sheep marinated. Records of people taken off for their son's birthday. There's an ostracon that was found in Thebes that talks about a worker getting treated for a scorpion sting, and we're talking medial hard labor. The stuff that people would use slaves for if they had a slave culture. I gotta stand up. I gotta stand. This is what we get from something called the History Channel. I gotta stay on the History Channel. They also had the Hyksos, and you can look up that show and see what they look like. But these are people thought to be the Hyksos. I know that one says Amenhotep. Nah, that's not Amenhotep. I've seen the other pictures. Look at these neck rings. Look at these neck rings. All in Egypt. Now this is found in Nigeria. More than 1,000 years later, newer culture. People don't just all of a sudden decide to wear neck rings. Hyksos was a word that meant foreign rulers. Who's to say they didn't join up? I think that's a better story. It's better than the His Story channel. What you see here is diversity. These people were depicted in Egyptian artwork. Today, one of them is in the middle of Asia, the other one is in South Africa. So I'm thinking they jumped the Nile Valley, banged around, jacked, plundered, and by the time they were sent on their way, they were pacified, because both of these tribes, I forget the names of them, you could probably look them up. Just look up neck rings. I think they're the only two that wear them today. But they're both like really cool, passive people. I'm gonna stay on the History Channel. Off the cuff. Still standing. That's Jehudimus. That's Jehudimus right there. I think her name is Winfred Mabel Brunton. 19th century. You get to paint a people's ethnicity. Check out the upturned nose. It becomes a trend. Also Jehudimus. Jehudimus. That is Jehudimus again. That is the History Channel's Jehudimus. I'm talking Jehudimus III. There's 3 of them. Well, 4. That's also Jehudimus III. All of these so far are Jehudimus III. Again, Jehudimus III. First one maybe symbolic. Second, actual skin tone. Jehudimus III also. Yeah, this is also Jehudimus III. That is his son, Amenhotep II. His grandson, Jehudimus IV. His grandfather. Look at his nose. Go back to that nose. Go back to that. Okay. How didn't I see this? I'm just now seeing this. I'm near the end of the project. Look at this nose. I'll get back to that. 2 trends. Upturn and 4 nostrils. That's Amenhotep III. That's his great-grandson. That's also him. Amenhotep III. There's a lot of pictures of him. This is his grandfather, Jehotimus I again. This is his father, Jehotimus II. Grandson, Jehotimus IV. Great-grandson, Amenhotep III. Father, Jehotimus II. It's Jehotimus III again.
Seem to get black.
Amenhotep II, his son, grandson again. Great-grandson, great-grandfather, father, son. Who is this person? Do an internet search on Thutmose III, and that's what you see. So this is all it is. Trial and error. This gets funnier the more I think about it. Anheuser-Busch lost a discrimination lawsuit, and they were punished like you'd punish a child. They had to, like, go do extra homework. They had to make African rulers, a line of African rulers. So now they get to market to black folks, and they don't get to pay out any money. So that was their Jehotimus III, and theirs is a little bit closer. But notice you almost kind of see that four nostrils here. But this is a remake, so I'll give this one the benefit of the doubt. Ancient Egypt is strategically put in whiteface. All of those pictures are of the same person, except for the one in the top middle, and that's like a representative. This is the Minister of Antiquities, and he's going to bring a profile for the face of a mummy. They're looking for Queen Hatshepsut, probably Queen of Sheba. It's a real video. You can look this up. Play it again. He's bringing it in for the Discovery Channel, it looks like. I watched the whole thing, and I picked up these two segments. What is he basing this on? What is he looking at? Is he looking at this statue of Sheba? Hatshepsut? Is he? So Discovery Channel, they shook that. They had some scientists that were kind of more interested in, you know, let's take a look at the mummies we do have. They brought Jehotimus 1, 2, and 3.
Anyhow, yeah, we can say that it's visual DNA.
As the faces are brought together, they coalesce into one image, one face. A composite picture of the Thutmose family. This is the image that will help guide their search as they try to figure out which mummy is Hatshepsut. Next, they examine the facial characteristics. They're looking for the long forehead, steeply sloped jawline, and wide nose of the Thutmose family. A composite picture of the Thutmose family. This is the image that will help guide their search as they try to figure out which mummy is Hatshepsut. Next, they examine the facial characteristics. They're looking for the long forehead, steeply sloped jawline, and wide nose of the Thutmose.
Well, you can see for yourself. I mean, they found their reconstruction has them on the search for a wide nose. Zawi Hawass comes in, hey, aquiline nose, heart-shaped mouth, just like that statue that, if you've looked at enough Egyptian statues, you know that Hatshepsut statue, Sheba, does not look right. What's closer to the description based on the measurements of 1, 2, and 3? Take a look at the skin tone. Then you have the nose. When that money's on the line, because they didn't want to go back to a judge. Look at that kid, a contrite. Same skin tone, wide nose. I think it's also, I don't know who this is. I think that's Amenhotep.
It's too early.
So it looks like his son.
At this point, but there is
Or Amenhotep III. There's so many Amenhotep IIIs. It's like he was vain or something. Egyptology and other sciences, when Egyptology lines up to them, Egyptology gets smacked down. Because this is the stuff they're looking at. This is their Sheba. This is Hatshepsut. You know, take a look. Same thing. We have this kind of downturn nose. You have 4 nostrils right here. Why do you have a human with 4 nostrils? A smaller nose was inserted into a wider cavity strategically to change their ethnicity. That's Imhotep, known as the father of medicine to the Greeks. You have a smaller nose and a wider cavity. But those are the last 4 real Imhoteps. Then we have another Sheba. Sheba again. This is same dynasty, same features, not listed. That's her. Also, Hatshepsut. Same complexion as those Afro-American-ish people, Anthony Anderson. Man, I hope that wasn't Anthony Anderson. He was chubbier then, so that wasn't him. That's also Hatshepsut. Also her.
Seem to get blacker and darker and blacker and then more darker. Huh.
King Tut. Mabel Brunton's work again. She better hope she doesn't run into these people in the afterlife. Yeah, this is Mabel Brunton. Her work was published across the United States. I don't know if it was across the world, but it wouldn't surprise me. Growing up, I saw her work, and it kind of fooled me in a way. This is an image of King Tut I see all over the place, but never in a museum. This is a real King Tut bust. This is also King Tut. Rarely seen. This is also King Tut. King Tut again, image that I've only seen a few times. Big statue. As you can see, that's his wife. Her nose was strategically pulled. This is also King Tut. I mean, that nose was carved out. That ain't erosion. This is King Tut's family's DNA results. They pulled that nose like Building 7. Ankhesenamun, his wife. This isn't, I'm not sure who this is. I thought I was trying to get King Tut's profile, but that's somebody in his family, because his was larger in South Africa. That's also King Tut, and also King Tut right here. Yeah, he's hitting South Africa hard. He's hitting hard probably because he's inbred. Another company, 2 different companies, reviewed a DNA sample that was taken from, I'll go into that a little bit, but it was taken from the Egyptian government, and they had commissioned some scientists who I'll go into about. This is also Mabel Brunton again. This is King Tut's wife, Ankhesenamun. I know that name isn't correct. I apologize. This is also her. I see this image a lot. Don't know where it came from. I know that it was not created by primary people. People of the Nile Valley didn't create that. And again, that's her nose carved out. I don't know who did that. If I had to guess, maybe Ottoman Empire. That's also her. Much of the work has survived. It's just that this is also her. The stuff that survived, we don't really get to see. That's her cleaned up a little bit. Now, if you really want to see something, Google her. If you can spell her name. It might say Ramses III. This is Ramses II, Mabel Brunton. It's also Ramses, probably pronounced Ramesus II. The Turin statue, it's in Italy. You can kind of see a pattern. That statue is not real. Nobody looks like that during that time period, at least in that area. None of the other artwork. There's also Ramesus. Ramesus again. Some very large statues. This guy was accomplished, and that's why his history is targeted the way it is. Large statues for Ramses II. Again, that's Ramses II. That's either Amenemhet or Ramses II. Sphinx. That's Ramses I, the grandfather of Ramses II. That's Seti, the father of Ramses II. That's either Seti or Ramses II.
Modaka.
That's Dozier. Peter O'Toole. I don't think that's Mabel Brunton's work. Comparing them to Peter O'Toole. Dozier again. Dozier. Yeah. We missed out. The world missed out. Could have had Rick James as the band that built the first pyramid. I'm Dozier, bitch. My name's Dozier. I smoke Dozier. Build pyramids. Come to Sikkim, enjoy yourself. That's Ramses III, more Mabel Brunton. It's also Ramses III. I don't know why she even wasted her time with Ramses III. I mean, he's pretty much the dictionary definition of an African dude, He's like greater African facial features and everything. Kind of remind me of this kid. And this kid from the Khan tribe. Khan tribe, as their history takes them to that location. They're way out in West Africa. This again, Ramses III. You can see these some 2 other ancestry DNA tests. 9 mummies have had their DNA tested for an ancestry, and it's been clear. where they're from. And with Ramses III, he pulled E1B1A. So, you know what that means. The Khan tribe, you're in the game. You are in the game. Redskin. And this is just the irony of history that Zawi Hawass will go down in history as the man that proved that the ancient Egyptians, Sikkim, Kemet, whatever you want to call them, they were from Greater Africa. Maybe Nefertiti could pass as a mixed chick a little bit. One quick thing that never really gets discussed: who sampled this DNA?
My name is Carsten Pusch. I'm
Here
associate
it is.
professor at the University of Tübingen at the Institute of Human Genetics, and I'm the head of the Ancient DNA work group. Yeah, something big happened in 2007. I got a phone call from the Egyptian parliament, which I thought this is a joke, because I thought nobody will call me from whatever, politicians and so on. They asked me to contribute or to act as a consultant in a project called the King Tutankhamun family story. And I said, after some negotiations, yes, because I thought it's a big chance, it is incredible to be whatever part of a story like that. In the end, I think everything turned out well. We got data more than we believed we would get. And we got a publication which was peer-reviewed, and we had this big media success. It was great. The King Tutankhamun family project was financed by the Egyptian parliament and also by the Discovery Channel. They wanted to film this, so they put out 2 movies in the end, each 1.5 hours. So a mummy has almost everything. A mummy has hair, teeth, skin, bones, but most of the stuff is surface materials. So the hair, the skin, the teeth and the skin is not a suitable source for an ancient DNA research because it's likely to be contaminated, and because it has been touched all over by whatever, starting with the ancient Egyptian priests and also with researchers in the last decades. So we decided to go inside the mummy, which means we have been working on bones, if possible long bones, because they consist of compact bone substance, a very dense structure, containing DNA with the least proportion of contaminant DNA molecules. And we use biopsy needles, just from modern medicine, like the surgeon, like the clinician uses it while doing a surgery, for example. And we could create, or we could generate biopsies from the bone and try to extract the DNA from these bones. You never know, so we took not only one sample, one biopsy per mummy, we took whatever 20 to 25 of these biopsies, because you can imagine with an age of 3,000.
Carsten Pusch. Still of a name, Carsten Pusch. And that's what I would do if I wanted to avoid contamination. You drill into the bone. Bone biopsy. Makes sense to me. I'm just getting started. If the truth turns you on, get naked. I'm just getting started. Amenhotep III. Also, Mabel Brunton's. Mabel WMB, Weapons of Mass Bull. Amenhotep III. With an Opie-like upturned nose. So the reason, there's a lot of facial diversity in Africa. It's questionable stuff right there too. But one thing you don't see is upturned noses. Very rare. So if you're gonna adjust, that's what you adjust for. And I understand, like, there's everything from beer to writing, chemistry. But that picture is also Amenhotep III. This picture sort of, it just shows you how this culture is a thorn to white supremacy. It sums it up right there in that picture. This is his father. I think it's like Sensoritus. I can't pronounce his name. This is Amenhotep III, maybe his son. Nobody really knows. This is also Amenhotep III. And something's amiss when you started with this and you end up with this and this. This is Nefertiti. It's cute. And Brunton was a good artist. It's just a shame, she had to go Nazi. This is Nefertiti. Many Nefertitis. But you see that one bust over and over again. But when you see her in total, to me she looks more like someone else than Amon. She looks more like Journey Smollett. It kind of fits, because out of everyone, she's probably the one that might be mixed chick, It's Queen T. I've already talked about Amenhotep III. He's all over the place. There's some cheeks. I think Dwayne Wade kind of. And the thing about Amenhotep is I thought that this picture was his two Mitanni wives and Queen T. That's Lady Kemsit. That's old. I mean, those might be the first people that you could pass as Caucasians in the artwork. And there's also Queen T. Queen T again. Ostrich feathers. Common with Nehesi. I'll get back to Nehesi. And she's wearing scale mail armor. If that Exodus movie got one thing right that you wouldn't expect, it's a scale mail armor. This is funny. This is Mabel Brunton again. When you absolutely have to change the complexion of someone that's jet black, you cheat. You go black and white. But still, when you look at the clothes, that's a good pick. This is Khufu, I think the Discovery Channel or the History Channel. This is Khufu from Sikkim. The Two Lands, Mizir, many names. It's Khufu again, known for building the largest pyramid. This is right here. It just shows you the lengths. Hemiunu, his whole head is fake. I'll show you in a minute. I mean, Hemiunu, see, the people that were targeted were the people that did something. He doesn't look like anybody. You know, he looks like nobody. I mean, this is Socrates. This is what some of the Greeks look like back in these days. We're talking Hemiunu. We're talking a completely fake head. And they're targeting him because he was advisor to the Pyramid of Giza, the largest one. You can't really do much with Khufu. I mean, his nose is so flat, you'd have to carve it out with what you peel potatoes with. And then look at him. That's a woman's body. Those aren't man boobs. Those are man boobs. I've seen man boobs. You know, that may be the real head. It's nameless. It was found at the same site, but the history behind it is twisted on purpose, so I don't know. But it does kind of fit, sort of. I tried to fit it to check. That might be the real Hemiunu. Probably a female. This is Khafre again. The son of Khufu. This Khafre, that looks a little curious, but we'll see some more of Khafre, a little bit more. We got some. Khafre again. Son of Khufu, also building the pyramid. This is Menkaure. Menkaure, if you look at him, if anybody could play in the NBA from this culture, it's him. If you could draft anybody, it's him. I mean, look at that. It's Menkaure. They look like my cousin. I mean, seriously, draft pick. If they, like, we're going to teach these guys basketball, I want to draft him. And I didn't, like, when I first saw this, I'm like, lankier than African Americans? You mean, I'm looking at this and I'm going through some of the skeletal measurements. I mean, lankier than the people that brought you John Jones. Those legs, those arms, those shoulders, that wingspan. It's crazy. I don't think that's the right head, though. And that has an upturned nose, and this is the one I think is the right head. Because that's bigger. It would fit that body type more. And even this, it was like, they upturned the nose and it wasn't hidden. This looks like it was remade with some integrity and some class. It's also Menkaure. This was recently discovered by people that, were a little bit more sincere about history and what they discovered. And this is his brother, only one picture. I think it's...
Seem to get blacker and darker and blacker and then more darker. Huh.
Hey, as a bonus, I'm going to include some Persians. Here we have Cyrus the Great, King of Kings. There's also Cyrus. Why he's so serious? It's Cyrus looking, with curly ass beard, looking like a little Puerto Rican. This is some Persians of his time period, Persian Empire. This is Lilith. Lilith is Adam's other, and this is crazy. I haven't even really gone through the whole Sumerian stuff, some of it, but this is like Adam's other wife. So if it's Adam, you got to change it up. A lot of stuff from the Abrahamic religions come from the Nile Valley and also Samaria. This is just a fake, a straight up fake, a fake based on a fake, a double fake. I mean, look at her. They got her dressed like the common African. Should be flattered by this. If you're of greater African descent, they got her dressed like Nelson Mandela before Nelson Mandela was born. Should be flattered. That's crazy. Breast out and everything. White or pink nipples. These are like the Abrahamics that came ashore or crossed over, wherever they came from. And you see, that was a lightened image. This is a more realer image. This is the image. They kind of remind me of the Neville brothers, honey complected with afros. This is another messed with statue. Why is the nose a different color? But this is a game. There's a lot of statues with broken noses. You target the people that stood out in history, and you replace those broken noses, or you edit those noses. This is what you get.
Look at the prognathism on the Sphinx. That's the extension of the lower portion of the face. You won't find that on the statue of Chephren. This statue does not protrude. That's this part of the face.
Frank also observed that the face of the Sphinx is more square, while Chepren's face is more oval. Proportionately, the mouth of the Sphinx is larger, while Chepren's mouth is a little finer. The eyes of the Sphinx are quite large in comparison to those of Chephren. After completing his initial observations in
somebody should pull Frank Domingo to the side. Hey, Frank, that's not what he looked like, Frank. Have you seen some of these other statues? His name wasn't Chephren. Have you seen some of these other statues of Khafre? Have you seen his family? Have you seen some of their other statues?
Egypt, Detective Domingo returned to New York to analyze his findings. Does the Sphinx look a little worried? While a study of the frontal view showed significant differences, the comparison of the lateral view was decisive. When the reference points in this lateral view were connected with vertical and horizontal lines, the difference of angles on the two works was extreme. The most conclusive finding was the angle between the outer eye and the vertical. In Chephren, that angle measured 14 degrees. But on the Sphinx, the angle was more than double, 32 degrees. This explains the protrusion of the lower jaw found on the Sphinx, but not on Chephren.
After reviewing all the measurements, angles, and proportions, it's my conclusion that the Great Sphinx of Giza is not the same individual represented in the statue of the pharaoh Chephren.
If the Sphinx isn't Chephren, who is it? Some eminent visitors over the years, among them Gustave Flaubert, thought the Sphinx was black African. According to Zulu history, in ancient times, their people inhabited northern Africa. When the rain stopped and the region became Sahara, the Zulu migrated south. In his detailed report, Frank Domingo suggests that the face of the Sphinx is consistent with typical African facial structure. After the New York Times published its op-ed piece on Domingo's work, orthodontist Sheldon Peck wrote a letter, independently arriving at the same conclusion. Orthodontists work with facial bone structure on a day-to-day basis. Wouldn't that be a twist on history?
Why is he talking about it like this is like some politically incorrect taboo subject? Again, we have the mention of those Zulus. Could be. I'm just saying, it is in their history. Same shield. Little, look like ink blots. We're talking like 5,000 years, 6,000 year difference. Same shield. This is a game. You take that and you change it into that. It is what it is. And this is 19th century. I don't think that's Mabel Brunton. I forgot who the artist was. You take a people whose skin tones are that dark, and what you do is you propagandize the young spirit. People see this and they'll believe it for the rest of their life. They'll say the Greeks were wrong. Described them as common Africans. They were there to see them, but they were wrong. This miseducation comes with an element of trust. Many pictures of broken noses and thick lips. Very common. Welcome to ancient Egyptian artwork. I have a collection. I'm in the hundreds, so I'm going to play them fast. And while they're playing, I'm going to give my theory for what Nahasi means. Nahasi is a difficult word to decipher. First, it's not necessarily surrounded by words that are translated. Only at best, 80% of the language is translated. And that's hard to describe because and I'm not even sure if that's even a literal translation. It's a perspective translation, and we're not even sure if we have the right perspective. And then so you look at how it's used, and it's a common name, like it's a cultural name, and it has sort of a section of land near Upper Egypt, but it doesn't really have set borders like a nation. And from those areas that are supposedly ethnically Nehesi, you have many leaders, rulers, Ptah, High House, Pharaoh that rise, and I could list a whole bunch of them. One of them is even named Nwanah, and he's living in the Delta. And then you see it, this is a strange one, is it's attached to a lot of other nations, almost like it's conquering them. But if it's conquering them, why is it still attached to their name? It's like you have the Meja Nehesi, the Puena Nehesi, Ta Seti, you have an actual John Nehesi, but it doesn't really have the shape or it isn't spoken about in the primary sources like it's a border. And you have the Kintu and Nefer, and some of these people that have that tag, they range from like just banditry to people who are like the forerunners for Egyptian culture. You don't really know what they're talking about. You kind of got to step out, and if you look at what it means in other languages, you see a variety. Nehesi in certain languages that share kinship with the Egyptian language means worthless, cultivators, barbarians, conquerors. I'm looking at that. Worthless, cultivators, barbarian, conquerors. It's starting to remind me of an intelligence agency, especially when you consider that the Nehesi were, and this is something I'm still studying, so I'm not really sure about this, but it may be that the whole concept of secret societies came from the border between ancient Egypt and Greater Africa, which was largely held by Nehesi. And what they would do, depending on how food stocks were, is they would have a lodge system where they brought in different people who may have wanted to seek refuge, or maybe they had some skills, they scouted, they created, they did whatever. And if there was a war, they probably, oh, come on in, you know, that's how it happens in every nation. But whatever, they were sort of the screening community, and that gave them a picture for what was out there in the world. So they were almost like a filter. So I'm looking at them like they're an intelligence agency of some sort that was semi-autonomous, but also working for the Pharaoh in many respects, the High House. So I then defer to the Whisperer, Imhotep. And Nehesi, his theory is that since Nehesi means electric catfish in a language that bears many relations, I think it's Tuluba, to the ancient Egyptian language, then that's the one he considers because that's a cool name for a banner. And the first Pharaoh, Narmer, was associated with catfish. And that it does sort of, you know, an intelligence agency, a banner, sort of like, if I use Game of Thrones again as an example, that's my theory for what Nehesi was. Yeah, if they're the banner of the first Pharaoh, that would explain their autonomy and their attitude, and why they work with and against, in frequent times, the empire. That's what I'm thinking, a semi-autonomous banner that sort of formed as a intelligence agency for ancient Egypt, but at times they were insubordinate. You know, they were like the CIA. They will kill Kennedy. What you see is, there are a lot of broken noses. There's unblemished artwork, and occasionally, maybe I can count them 3 times, they are somewhat properly restored. So dap it up, go to the market, let's barbecue, make some bread, slice some beef. Just got work to do. You know, put on some music, dance a little bit, or you sit down, play some Senate. I like Senate. Chess. I don't want any fake pictures, gotta have it real. Then we'll go to work again. Because I guess this is a slave culture. They value work this much, they make figures of themselves working. This is unblemished art. This picture was on some website called March of the Titans, where they were talking about how black folks moved in, kicked out Hemiunu, and I didn't even know it was like that this picture was a force. This is a set. It's the mother of Uru. It's one of my favorite pictures. I don't know why. It just seems like a Disney movie. Like, we're off to go to war. We don't know how to fight. We're skinny. But They look like they're ready to kick some ass. I like that picture too. It's a very Ethiopian. I mean, they just keep coming and coming. This is the unblemished start. I apologize if I repeat a couple pictures. Now take a look at these dogs. Take a good look. This is the facial features. If you ever just want to laugh, there's like these Caucasian Egypt movies, and this is the stuff they show, like faded people. It might be like one real person and some edited art, maybe 5 real people, and they'll play like that same stuff. Now, I can beat that in 1 row of Shabti dolls, 1 boat, and have boats to spare. So if you ever wonder, like if you see anything 42 tribes and you're like, how come there's so many black? I thought they, well, just look at this video and this is why. You know, I've got a fleet of ships, and I can throw in some histories stuff, some quotes from the people who were there. And I'm serious, like those videos, look them up. They're kind of funny. They will play like the same 10 people over and over again, real slow. If I were to play all of these pictures slow, or these tropical looking people, this video is already too long. But imagine how long it would be if I played it like a Caucasian Egypt movie. The little YouTube videos, oh, it would be like 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. But I just, look at this person, look at him, real slow. Yeah, this is just bang, 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 bang. These are greater Africans. These are people from all over Africa. I don't think the pan, I have some issues with the DNA test, which are long story, but it's still, when you consider that Ramses III had E1B1A, but was still pulling L's from the Horn, that shows movement to me. That shows diversity amongst greater Africa. And these are some of the Nahesi folk. I think one of them was a little sweet. Peppy. But anyway, I don't care. You have a nation of that many people, you're gonna get what you get. And sometimes I just like to clown, man. Because if you look at enough of these statues, you start to see people that you've seen before in life. And you're like, well, facial features really just haven't changed that much. I think she looks more like Jada Pinkett. It's just me. It's just me. Now, somebody else on the internet made this comparison, and I cannot argue with it at all. Nicki Minaj and King Tut's mama, pretty much the same look. Look at more Mabel Brunton. That's Akhenaten. This is a stylish picture of Akhenaten, which kind of does remind me of Arsenio Hall, but this, at least, unless somebody, I'm corrected, is also Akhenaten, so he kind of like to mix up his look. He would seem like a very eclectic individual, I guess. They just keep coming. They just keep coming. Well, hold on, I gotta go back to that. Look at this, is there a hand on her? Hey, okay. I think I'm repeating certain pictures. I apologize if I'm repeating certain pictures. When you get into the multi-hundreds, you kind of don't recognize them all at the same time. You're like, oh, I don't know if I have that, add that, add that, add that. This is it. And this is why I'm playing this. Well, we'll go into mix it up. These are some of the Libyan folk. Now, when I first saw this guy, I thought Somalian, but then I remembered this Alfred Kaminu, who's a Nigerian basketball player. And wow, you know, it's ironic though, and it's not ironic. This is what's going on. He's from the Hausa tribe, who have history in the Nile Valley, just like that Akan kid, just like the Zulu, just like many other tribes. These are more Libyans. I don't know if that's a Libyan. These are the Ptah Punt people, Ethiopia. Unless it's in another location, we still aren't sure. These are Syrians, also Syrian. These are Persians. Xerxes or Darius. These are Persian guards. I think I showed those earlier. This is sort of the novel that I've got to read if I want to learn about early Sumeria. And Sumerians, because they spoke a Niger-Congo branch language, from the jungle, you can see very different facial features for the Sumerians. Very melting potish, it appears. Still studying Sumeria. These are all Sumerian so far. This is Ahmose. Credited her for the woman writing the first book. These are the Canaanites. modern Israel, Akkadians, and these are Greeks, who later came, I figure they were probably living, had a neighborhood or so. That's Hercules. And this is Idris, I forget his name. He was Heimdall in Thor, and people had problems with that. But if you really look at the Vikings, they were described as black people, and people, you know, said, okay, maybe. But take this up with this dude in Egypt Reloaded. He broke down DNA sequence, and he found some Kenyan, North African, you know. So maybe it's not just black-hearted people. Maybe the Vikings were not the pure Nordic race. Now I'm just clowning. But I mean, this is real. Huni, Warren Sapp. I'm just saying. Mod Squad. Yeah. I really am gonna go there. Grady is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. But I mean, now I couldn't find anybody. I mean, I started thinking maybe, and that is a story for that picture. Look up that video. So I was leaning towards Bill Cosby, and I had to go with one of his kids. Oh, it's 42 tribes. No Nubians. No Nubian. No red people. No red animalios. Maybe some red asses. Some people might get caught. It's 42 tribes. The Malalela. That's how Asari Motep says the glyphs. The whisper. Not sure. I can tell that Metanetter is wrong. The Malalela is not carved. It's decaled. You need 500 pictures to run these montage generators. I had 550. It still duplicates them, but just to run the program, to ungray enter. Of that 550, it was mostly just tropical looking Egyptians. Maybe 20 pictures of Greek, 30 or so, maybe Nahesi, and it generates Patrice Lumumba. I didn't expect to address Hollywood at all. And I'll try to be quick on this. This is, actually I can't, because this leads to something else that nobody wants to say. So I just can't wait to say it. I'm the type, that's what makes me make these videos. I'm like, wow, nobody's saying this. Damn, nobody's saying this. I gotta say it. With Ridley Scott, the executive producers for Spike TV's Tut, whatever baboons they got working over in Brazil, and Alex Proyas, what they're doing is far more racist than anything Donald Sterling was responsible for, and that's including the stuff he said in the housing discrimination suit, which is worse than what he said when he was recorded by his girlfriend. The thing about the girlfriend, that really became more of a comedy show the moment he said he was okay with her having sex with Magic Johnson. Then it was just, we're all wilding out. It didn't, actual impact of what he was saying wasn't really the story. But what they're doing is worse. At the foundation of any type of hatred, bigotry, racism, is to reduce someone. It's dehumanization. When you change the face of a people like this, like they have, and they've done it. Now I'll go and give examples. I'm talking painfully obvious. Then you're robbing them of their contributions, I can't speak, to humanity. That makes it easier for you to just screw them over. Especially when you're talking about all that came out of the Nile Valley. When if you're a man and you're circumcised, you go to pee, you are touching Nile Valley. Actually, we're talking like Great Lakes African technology. I don't even like it. I don't know who the hell thought of it. But that's where it came from. Metal. Around that same location. Writing. Medicine. When a man who has a mathematical theorem named after him, Pythagoras, studies for 20 years in the Nile Valley, it was either 19 or 21. Beer, guitars, religion, chemistry, down to the atom. This is history's thievery in media, used as a tool to socially engineer us. And all of this stuff was known. They've known the real face of ancient Egypt. I'll get to that. Ridley Scott, Alex Proyas, the executive producers for Spike TV, they're worse than Donald Sterling. Better person than Ridley Scott. And Ridley Scott, He even talked about it. And he said, well, we're bringing diversity. It's all part of something that's been socially engineered. We're socially engineered to believe that this group of tropical looking people with all this artwork, that if you really look at it with a little common sense, you can see how it's defaced. We're socially engineered to believe that they are Arabians, when the term Arabia didn't even exist during their time. So I'll go through it. That's Sar. He's a force. One of the things I respect that nobody really brings up is it doesn't seem like they sweat the small stuff. They're like, hey, erect penis in a geometry program because we feel like it. Can you take a joke? You know, BC, BBC. You hardly ever see this picture. Here's a penis. One thing you won't see, people walked around naked. They might, in the Exodus movie, they might have gotten the scale mail. But people walking around naked, just like the Dinkas in the Sudan right now. If you go see a 42 Tribes movie and nobody tells you what you're looking at, you'll never know. That's ancient Egypt. I never even heard the word Egypt through the whole thing. There's a bunch, who are those people walking around naked? So Nicolaj will play Asar. The son of Asar, actually. He'll play Haru. So I have to measure up to his dad, Jaime Lannister. And then, this is Pharaoh I. He'll be played by Ben Kingsley in the Tut movie. Ivan Jogia, I think his name is. I'm probably butchering it. He'll be playing King Tut. And Spike TV said, damn, science. Egyptology is our buttercup. Joel Egerton. He's going to be Ramses II. This is a statue of Ramses II. This statue, people are saying that's the Sphinx. I think that's Ramses II. The Sphinx was already created. If they're creating the Sphinx, then this is really some Bush League. Well, it's already Bush League stuff, but you get what I'm saying. Those are more Ramses II. Ramses II. This is Ramses II skin tone. To me, he kind of looks a little like Joel Egerton, but more in the James Harden, Anwar Sadat range. And this is his son. This is Bel. Again, he'll be Moses. And that's where I've got to go in. There's a real Moses. The Tut movie bothers me. I hate to see it get the Pat Boone treatment. Does it really have to get the Pat Boone treatment? Come on, Spike TV. Lord, Lord, Lord. I didn't think I'd have to take on Moses. Remember, I said that the first lie is calling the nation Egypt. And I've been using that word. It's named after Ptah. The souls of Ptah. Egypt, Ptah. Later, just Egypt. At least that's the mainstream story. I really don't know. I know Kemet better than I know Egypt. But I like the name. The Greeks have done worse. They're recreating an ethnicity instead of matching the souls of creativity. That's what Egypt means. The Greeks have done worse. You won't hear it in 42 Tribes. I'm just saying I don't dislike the name. If I ever go, if I know the Malalela enough to go, because I'm not going to go unless I can read the writing on the walls, or else it'll be a waste of money. Go over there all militant, like, this ain't, the Greeks gave this name. It's a good name. It wouldn't really matter what the actors look like in this Exodus movie. It could nail the artwork, whatever diversity is there, it could match it 100%. And it's still social engineering. It's just the icing on the cake. The real social engineering isn't this illusion of a incredible biracial Egypt that looks kind of like Samaria and Semites skipping around. The real grand illusion is the story of Moses. The books of Moses, and this is just my opinion, I'll explain how I draw this conclusion. The books of Moses have some of the same stories as the Egyptians and the Sumerians. That's known. Everybody who really looks knows that, I would think. The Sumerian flood story is the Noah story with just different characters. And I haven't really looked into it, but they have their Lilith was Adam's other wife. You can look up Lilith. She's in the top 20 most whitewashed characters in history. Distant to Jesus, but still top 20. There's so many Nile Valley stories that parallel the Bible, and specifically the books of Moses. These stories, and it's wrong to even use the word parallel, these stories were on papyrus and stone hundreds, and at times, depending on the story and whenever everything was written, thousands of years before a Torah. Most rabbis that I've heard will not tell you otherwise. They'll say that everything's based on oral traditions. Okay? Egypt already had a Moses figure. The 19th dynasty began with Ahmose, the founder. And he was born a prince, incestuous birth, like Moses. And when he was born, his people were under foreign rule. They were enslaved in Lower Egypt. So they had been enslaved, the Egyptians, on their own soil. Lower Egypt for generations. And like Moses, he freed the slaves. Ahmose of the moon. It's like Juan and John with Moses. And that's why Moses has the whole, and see him with horns, represent the crescent with the Babylonian deities. Allegedly, at the time Nehesi were working with and against Upper Egypt. Both Moses and Ahmose married darkly complected women. One pyramid was created during the time where the Bible says that these people were in Egypt. And that pyramid was the pyramid of Ahmose. Shoddy creation. It was made with sand and rubble. It collapsed in on itself. If any pyramid was made with slave labor, that's my bet. I've heard theories about who matches, and I look for these. I don't hear them. I go research them. Who matches Moses? Ahmose doesn't get the perspective that he deserves. Who matches Moses? Akhenaten, as the Whisperer calls him, Kantaga. I won't go into details. Jehudamus III, at times Amenehet III. They have some parallels, more conflicts, but none of them come as close to the parallels as Ahmose, which is pretty much the same name. And then you see the same pattern. There's other stories that act as filler for the books of Moses. And these stories come from Egyptian texts. Several lines from the Ahmose Stela are paraphrased in the books of Moses. An Egyptian wizard, Zajamak, parted the Red Sea before Moses was born. Heru floated on a reed basket. It's the same name, just a different culture spin. Several of the plagues in the Exodus were in See Asar, which was a kind of an interesting story. It has some lies, some ethnic lies that are put into it, where fake Nubian people call Egyptians white dogs. Primary stuff doesn't have that. It's still a good story. Moses talks to a bush. It's God. It's 10 commandments. 8 or 9 are the 42 declarations of innocence, based on 42 laws of Malungu. That's Whisper for Malat or Ma'at. The books of Moses don't know the name of the pharaoh. It's attributed to Ramses because there was a land of Ramses and there was stuff built, blah, 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 Ramses. It mentions Ramses, so it goes to that, to Ramses II for some reason. But the actual timeline points closer to that 19th dynasty. But why didn't it call the pharaoh by name? What does it mean to be lost for 40 years? Were they sinning? Is it figurative? And the numbers, the numbers don't work either. It's too many people in the hundreds of thousands. And they're chased by an army of chariots, less than 1,000 chariots. Shouldn't the chariots catch them? Why don't they turn around and fight? And then I look back at some other parts of the books of Moses, where it specifically says God hardened Pharaoh's heart so he would not let them go. And it's plain words. It's nothing. If that's mistranslated, then the whole book is mistranslated. God hardened Pharaoh's heart so he would not let them. It's simple, whatever version. And then I look back and how God gave them permission to enslave people after they were taken from bondage through Moses. And how can God evangelize with the power of God to demonstrate God's mighty power upon the Egyptians and fail so miserably that he has to go and tweak Pharaoh to make him mad so he has to show off more? It's a maniacal frame of logic, and people take it as gospel. And it gets even worse than that. When Moses leaves, it gets a lot worse. I look back, did a little bit of research. Ridley Scott actually said that he thought that religion was one of the biggest sources of evil. Then what's up with him? He's just going to make, run the same Exodus story, run it like a typical big budget, thoughtless. Why not show a biblically accurate Moses, or better yet, why not Ahmose? A real Ahmose story? Make people shake, scratch their head like that old, I think there was an Italian Pinocchio story that were very similar, but why not one of those? He could have, a truly biblically accurate Moses goes on a Pol Pot killing spree. He goes on a killing spree that would make Joseph Kony blush. I mean, this is serious King Leopold stuff. He massacres 60 cities to a person, man, woman, and child. The first of the cities, and this is in any Bible, the first city, he spares the virgins, like the girls that haven't played hide and go get it enough. And after that, it's on. Everybody's getting it. That's the story we get. If you want to sell that religion's evil, if you feel that way, then go for it. But if you're just going with the standard Exodus movie, I don't care what ethnicity you put out there, you've already shown that you've sold out. Do your research. I want to see Christian Bale go on a wonton, beheading people, children getting cut up. I want to see Christian Bale be Moses. I want to see a real Moses. Come on, Christian. Cut some kids up. I want beheadings. I want entrails ripped out of their stomach. I want Moses. With some statutory rape. I want the real Moses. Ooh. Whoa, whoa, whoa. 42 tribes, no Nubians. An hour and a half. The face of Egypt, it's always been known. There's no big secrets. The descendants show it. When DNA consultants ran that sample, the same one the tribes ran, they did a breakdown, and it was sort of tongue-in-cheek because it wasn't a thick enough sample to really trace what happened to these people or the descendants. But they did mention some possibilities, and they talked about the Coptics who were there, and you could see it with them. Count Devoni, and this is 18th century, 1785, came to the same conclusion just from looking at them, and charted this. He wrote, I'll quote it, "All have a bloated face, puffed up eyes, flat nose, thick lips, in a word, the true face of the mulatto. I was tempted to attribute that to the climate. When I visited the Sphinx, its appearance gave me the key to the riddle. And seeing the head, typically Negro, all its features, I remember the remarkable passage where Herodotus says, as for me, I judge the Colchians to be a colony of the Egyptians because, like them, they are black with woolly hair. In other words, ancient Egyptians were tuning, blah, 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 blah." That's what his impression was from seeing the Copts in 1785. In 1885, ironically, the Bibliographic Institute released one of their versions where they had a picture of just different African tribes. This is that picture. Can you find the Coptics? Let's play. Can you find the Coptics? There's two of them. Can you find them? 3, 2, 1. If you vote it, if you pick these two, you hit it. You have found the Coptics. And if you go back even before that, they had black-skinned Jesus. That's the game. The face was known. So what's next?
And
what should I do
darker.
next? The Jet Pillar? The relation to voodoo? The secret of the pyramids? Give me some ideas. This is Narmer. The Whisperer calls him Bukulu. That's Mabel Brunton's version of him. This is the Egyptianist version, allegedly. He's supposed to be the first pharaoh. He was found by William F. Petrie. I remember when I first saw a picture of Narmer, I think I was trolling some site. Oh, I wasn't trolling, I was eavesdropping. And someone posted that picture, and oh, they screamed Afrocentric at him. Times twice. several times. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, well, if a person can look Afrocentric, Ukulu is Afrocentric. And he kind of looks like Mike Tyson. So I wondered, is this really the first pharaoh? And who is this Petrie guy? Who found him? I looked at some of the rationale. It does kind of match the Narmer palette. And I looked up Petrie, and I'm like, well, okay, this must be a liberal thinking fella. Eventually he had also figured out that the Egyptians came into the land, the Tasari and Temeria, to Shemu, and they came in from the south. And I'm like, did I read this right? Let me read this. This is William Finder's Petrie. He contends, he never ceased to believe, and this is from his biography, that a Caucasoid race entered Egypt from the south in late pre-dynastic times, conquered the inferior and exhausted mulatto race, probably talking about Arabs, that was inhabiting Egypt, and slowly introduced the finer dynastic civilizations as they interbred with their inferior indigenous people. Sounds almost like the Greeks and the that's just crazy. And this is the father of Egyptology? Now, supposedly he changed his tomb 3 years before he died, as it happens. This is how the groundwork for this information was laid. If you find somebody that looks like Mike Tyson, he's your first pharaoh, his nickname is Catfish. If you really were to break down his language, you might find that his name is Bukulu. But this was a fine Caucasian race, like Kimbra Jackson, or Kimbra Johnson? I don't know. Johnson or Jackson, all the same. But this stuff was known, and he knew it, regardless of what happened, 3 years before he died. Because this is the de facto face. I mean, there is a real actual face, and that's what I'll end with, this is a glyph for face. Petrie knew about this. Hell, Mabel Brunton probably knew about this. They're all over the place. They're all over the ruins. Remind me of the San tribe. Maybe through their science they understood that the San tribe were the oldest modern humans. So maybe they got to model for the face. Maybe. It's written on the walls. This isn't an accident. This is a lie. The truth was right there. It was on the wall. They know the face. That's how social engineering works. It's not about what is, it's what I say is. So, thanks for sticking around. 42 tribes.